Hello and welcome back to Field of Glory Napoleonic tabletop reenactment of Waterloo. So, I'm here with Napoleon. I think we'll just adjust the camera slightly. So Napoleon, how's things going since the last time we saw you?
We're much more optimistic now.
Well, that's a good thing. Well, not for the British.
Two of the historical battlefield objectives have been taken,
So
La Haye Sainte and Hougoumont.
You've taken La Haye Sainte, okay.
The ridge line of the British is under pressure. Our guard cavalry have gone in, and some of our infantry are supporting them. We're optimistic.
So La Haye Sainte is captured, Hougoumont is captured,
Yep.
French are advancing across here.
Guard cavalry here
We have the Guard cavalry in the middle.
against the British household cavalry and Scots.
So Scots Greys and Household Cavalry.
And also on the other flank, the guard cavalry are supporting the cuirassiers against the ridge.
And here it looks like is that Napoleon's come
No,
up?
it's
It's
still
Ney,
Ney.
sorry, it's Ney. Oh, Napoleon's still admiring the view from the back.
That's right. Food. Always think of food.
So what's happened on the hill? Have you broken through at all?
We're just attempting to. We're about to throw the combat dice to find out how well we've done. Hopefully we can put some pressure.
If you break through this cavalry, will that create enough confusion behind to potentially follow through and take out some of this infantry with your cavalry?
Well, the plan is to beat the cavalry and disrupt the infantry and move the guard in.
Ah, where is the guard? The guard's on the advance.
It's on the advance now.
Right.
So we're hopeful.
And then over on this side, Papelotte is still in Nassau hands.
Still on
The
Nassau.
Nassau still held it. And then over with the Prussians, how confident are we feeling?
Holding on. There's an awful lot of Prussians now.
Oh, it does feel like things are looking a bit better than they were earlier. So things are more in the balance than they were. Thank you very much, Napoleon.
Thank you.
Wellington, could we have a word?
Yes.
Wellington, you don't look as cheerful as you did earlier, Wellington.
Well, no.
What happened?
Well, we bounced the first attack and we bounced the second cavalry attack rather well. But having lost La Haye Sainte and having a large amount of artillery deployed down there, we've had to launch our heavy brigade in to get rid of the enemy artillery, which we've managed to do. But we're now head-to-head with the French Guard cavalry. So
the British cavalry came out to attack a French artillery battery.
two massive artillery battles here, one of which we made run away, one of which we've ridden down. So our heavy dragoons have had some success, but we're now facing the elite of the French Guard lancers.
Those artillery cannot come back?
Cannot come back.
Right,
they are gone. And I have to say the battle in the middle, since you last saw us, has been turned around by Marshal Ney himself, because he's rallied and bolstered every single thing on the battlefield.
Well, that's what he does, isn't it?
He's been running around waving his hat, and has got all of the French going again. So we're going to have to do it all over again, Ian. We're going to have to stop them all over.
So things are looking far more finely balanced than they were earlier, and it looks like you may actually need the Prussians.
I think we would definitely need the Prussians, yeah.
So let's have a quick word with Blucher. Blucher, where are you?
He's miles away.
Yeah, he is. He's miles away. So Blucher, tell us, how are things developing? Oh, I see another column of Prussians arriving on another road.
Yes, there's a lot more of us now.
That looks a much more effective front line that you've got here.
It is now. We've been slowed up. We've pushed back the French light cavalry, and I think we'll be having another combat quite shortly.
And you were saying around an hour to get some pressure on the French line. How are we feeling about that? Are we still an hour away, or is it?
We're we'll put pressure on these units in front of us within the next 15 minutes.
Imminent.
Yes.
Combat is imminent.
And then we'll be pushing onto the French right flank.
Thanks very much, Blucher. That's very interesting, and it looks like you will be needed. The British seem to be on the edge, and your contribution could be the vital turning point. We're just going to check with the digital team, see if they are ready to have us back. Somebody seems to have dropped something. Hopefully nobody was injured. So we're going to pass back over to digital team whenever they're ready.
was just saying that the perspective is handled really well. You get the impression that those French, because we're now playing the Prussians, are really a long way away. Not only are the figures smaller as they would appear, but the colours get progressively more washed out, which is also
effect.
Well, it's a distance effect.
Yeah.
If you look at a range of hills, the ones furthest away look paler blue as opposed to the blue of the ones near to.
Yeah. So Bart, you've decided that you've given up on the French and you're now playing for the other side.
Exactly, we switched sides here.
Bart's playing for the other side?
I thought I'd get that one in. See if we could get away with it or not.
So if we briefly open the map here, we are playing the Prussians, so the ones in red over here, and we just pushed the French out of these woods very easily. There was
it was a masterful plan.
A masterful plan, a major victory for the Prussians. And now the French have fallen to the second line of defense, and we're
apparently the battle sounds are a bit too loud.
Ah, okay. Hopefully that should be better, but please keep the feedback coming. So the French have fallen back to the town of Plassinois, and that is our objective for this battle. So we got a couple of Prussians already present, but a large chunk of the force is still moving in. So they're slowly marching in from here.
Are you able to control which routes they take?
If I were to play the entire battle, I would be able to do it. Here they already got their initial orders, so I can redirect them. But then there would be a courier all the way from my location. First have to arrive there, and then they have to reorganize. And
are you just going to let them get on with it?
Yes.
I mean, realistically, the Prussians at the front, I can see how they had an effect, but the ones that are further down this column, are they ever going to get to the battlefield in time, or would it be over before they arrived?
Well, by the end of today, the French start routing, and they are pursued by the Prussians, because the Prussians were the only side on the Allies who had enough freshish troops to carry out the pursuit. The Allied army under Wellington was completely and totally exhausted. Even if you're not actually physically fighting and shooting, people are being shot and killed around you.
Yeah, it's a very stressful and tiring situation.
Stressful, I think, is a reasonable word for it, yes. But they were totally done in, as it were.
So the Prussians they pursued, and that inflicted more casualties on the French and stopped them regrouping.
It did, and the French ran for their lives, and the Prussians, full of hate for the way they'd been treated over the last few years by the French, pursued them and slaughtered them with vigour. The saving grace on the French side is Grouchy. Although he'd managed to let the Prussians slip away from him, he managed to get round behind the Prussian pursuit and fought, I think, 2 or perhaps 3 holding actions against the Prussians between here and Paris.
So Waterloo was not the actual last battle in the campaign. There were more battles later. Engagements rather than battles.
With this army, yes, but also further along on the German frontier, a huge German force, 80,000, was held up by about 20,000 French in a defensive battle from the French point of view. So yes, it's the War of 100 Days, or Campaign of 100 Days, as it's often referred to, wasn't simply fighting in and around Waterloo. There were other battles going on as well.
So the other battles, the other 20,000 versus 80,000, was this before or after Waterloo?
That's a very interesting question.
Would they have known about the result at Waterloo?
They wouldn't. They certainly would not have known.
Right, so they still thought there was a chance of
victory. The people on the German frontier would have known what had happened at Waterloo. Similarly, down in the south-east on the border with Italy, there were actions going on there on a much lower scale. Certainly the whole of Europe was mobilising to make sure that Napoleon didn't really get any foothold anywhere ever again.
Right, so here, just to give you an idea of the scale of this battle.
I'm completely lost. So let's show us the battle lines.
From left to right, or from our perspective.
What's that church?
This is the church of Plassinois.
Ah, so we're looking at Plassinois, right?
Exactly. So I let the AI do it for themselves over here. There's no way I can focus on the entire battle line. So I've ordered the AI to act aggressively in this area and to attack the opposition where they find them. So we got French cavalry over here, so the infantry is already covering their own flank by deploying into a square, while the others are moving up. And we got skirmishers being sent forward to engage the garrison infantry within this church.
I've kind of lost my bearings. East, west, north, south. Where's the rest of the battle?
West is north on this screen.
West is
Right.
West is up
So
on this
yeah,
screen.
north is this direction.
So that's the main battle ahead of us. Oh, no, I'm completely disorientated.
I'll show you the map here. So we're over here, and the English line will be about over here.
Right.
So yeah, mainly to our north.
British.
British.
Allied. Yes.
Allied.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Otherwise the Dutch will get
That's
stroppy.
true. Dutch and the Belgians and everybody else.
Germans.
Yep.
Yeah.
KGL.
So I've taken control mainly in the center of the line, and I deployed a line over here, supported by artillery, although not ideally positioned at this very moment.
They seem to be shelling plants in the ones at the moment.
Which is fine, really, at this point, I suppose. Just bring them up a bit more. We have our cavalry on our right that is threatening the French flank. There's some cavalry skirmishes going on here. And this is all again AI controlled. I just ordered them to go into this general direction with an aggressive stance and let them fight it out, because there's no way I can micromanage at this distance.
Yep.
So my plan is to break the basically the French line in two. So if I break through the center here, where I push my main effort, these guys will all be isolated from the town of Plancenoit, which is my actual objective. So we'll be able to attack that with relative ease to flank it.
So you're just trying to keep the French away from Plancenoit while the AI fulfills the attack.
Exactly.
So you're just going to let the AI do all the hard work.
Yeah, pretty much. If it's if an objective is difficult, you delegate it to your subordinate. So if it goes wrong, you can blame him.
Yes.
Cunning. Matt's got a lot to learn about spreading the blame.
Don't be upset about it.
Come on, no.
I thought you did well under the circumstances.
It's the first time I've played that scenario.
Ah, nice of you to come and help me. So I ordered these light cavalry units to. There was French batteries deployed over here, so I ordered them to it as quickly as possible and just disrupt them, so they didn't make any inflict any casualties whatsoever. But the entire artillery line has been moved back and is less efficient, of course. In this
Yeah, I've
position.
wasted time. Time they could have been firing, they're now wasting moving.
So the enemy is deploying into a square here, so that's a great time for me to actually advance a bit. So I'm fairly close to the front line here, so I can give my orders directly. I feel fairly confident in this area.
It's pretty good superiority.
Unfortunately, my cavalry was too afraid of the square. There you guys, that's far enough.
Hand to hand, if you're not careful.
Yeah, and they will.
Turns it to a little bit of a lottery then, doesn't it?
It does. I think I do have some numerical superiority, but it's always tricky.
How's their morale doing? Can you track who's winning that battle?
It's very difficult to see, to judge. I think I'm getting the upper hand here, but just judging from the number of sprites that are engaged.
Yep, there they go.
The problem now is they first have to reform before they can set up a proper, before they can continue fighting again. So that's also a bit unfortunate. So we deploy them into a line. We're going to wheel the line, and we using hotkeys here to make them face the enemy. Overall, though, that was turned out better than it could have. I was quite lucky there. We also see that the AI, I didn't deploy these skirmishers, the AI did, and directly on their flank.
Yeah, that French line is looking very vulnerable now.
So let's just see how it goes on our left then.
How's the AI doing with your main job?
We got the French cavalry threatening our flank, but we got a very solid square over here. So hopefully that will keep them off. Like, troops to get involved. But
Can you tell him to pursue the attack more vigorously, or
yes, there are different modes of attack you can set. In this case, they're set to attack, whereas there's also the assault mode,
right,
where they're more aggressive, basically. And
taking higher risks, I assume?
yes, exactly. Also more inclined to go into melees.
Men standing on in the stream down here, centre of the screen.
Yeah. I suppose that wouldn't be the best position to be in.
Not when you might get your powder wet.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's not simulated in this case. They only get a movement malice.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, you see these guys over here, they're moving at significantly reduced speed. They're represented, they will be wading through the water, basically. So it's still not something you would like to do, but... So here we have our first reinforcements, our first fresh troops coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2nd Cavalry Brigade asking for orders. We always like that. So let's see where they arrived at. So they're coming over here from the road. They're deploying. So we should be giving them some orders shortly. For now, let's just tell them to move up a bit so that they're closer when I need them. And we need to continue our push over here. Let's flanking force.
Just mopping up.
Sure looks like it. Put a bit more pressure. We can see in the distance some French running away, which is always a good sight. Since we're playing the Prussians now.
Yes, you slip into this alternative mode really easily. don't you?
Exactly, yeah. So we're more engaged to advance while firing, so they'll slowly creep up closer to the enemy, and meanwhile setting up a flanking force over here. I want these guys to do. Let's take some risks here. So I ordered the charge. It is not, no. I feel fairly confident now.
You're a bit of a bully, aren't you?
Laser trying to disengage over here. The French routed before there was an actual battle took place there, which is, I suppose, a more historical result
Yes.
of a bayonet.
Well, you
strike.
can't blame them. They're in a really awful position, outnumbered, outflanked, losing in every respect.
So after we dealt with these guys, I'm going to turn my forces facing toward my left and basically attacking the town from this direction, essentially flanking it. Because my cover is already clear at the batteries that were closest, that would be turning on my flank then. It should be relatively safe to do so. These are disengaging but not routing. We fix the enemy and advance. Let's bring our artillery a bit closer to the target. Only first cavalry units are moving. Where are you going, guys? I need to move away from you. Things seem to be alright at this end. French cavalry really doesn't dare to make a move. Meanwhile, we got enough superiority to outgun the French.
They're bringing up reinforcements, aren't they, or are they retreating?
They're reforming, but we got there's a significant French force behind the town actually.
Yes. And they're still manoeuvring.
Yes. Not sure I'm happy with that.
Hold the churchyard.
Yeah, at the moment the church is still occupied by French troops, so it seems. Let's finish these guys off. We're getting flanked here actually. So I'm charging what remains of the French square. Hoping to rat them. The commander
Is legging it.
One of the options in this game is to have your troops switch between fire at will or the volley fire.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain a bit how these different fire modes were used? Or
Yes, well, at the beginning of the battle, the troops will start off, every man loaded under the supervision of his NCO, his non-commissioned officer, corporal, sergeant, whatever. This means that the first volley that they deliver will be, every musket will go off pretty much on command. And then things start to break down. It's human nature that some people will load their guns faster than others. Some will make mistakes and not put the powder in the pan so the flash goes off. Some people will leave the ramrod in the gun and then not be able to fire it again. So from after the very first volley, the number of muskets who will fire, or the percentage of muskets that will fire, will start to reduce, and the flint, which causes the spark, which fires the pan, which fires the bullet, also degrades. Every time you pull the trigger, little bits of flint fly off, and so you end up with a little stubby bit which won't work at all, which means you have to fall out of line, usually kneel down at the back of the ranks and replace the flint. So the idea of maintaining a volley under those circumstances is just not practical. However, officers were well aware that the most effective thing you could do when firing was to fire a volley. It creates a fire shock in the enemy. Somebody taking a pot shot, a series of pot shots at your unit is not so impressive or frightening as everybody on the other side firing at you personally and your 5 mates that we discussed before, firing at the same time.
right.
So fire at will is what you do when you're having a long firefight. There are other options. In the British Army, it wouldn't be the whole battalion who would fire a volley. It would be a platoon, one company, if you like, out of the whole body, and the fire would one platoon, then the next would fire successively, so that by the time the last platoon had fired, theoretically the first platoon had reloaded and was able to fire again. So
Right.
you had a rolling fire that appeared never to end. That's in ideal circumstances. It was very difficult to achieve in practice, but it was still a very effective way of doing it. And it was actually copied from the Dutch in the 17th century, or possibly the 18th century. Fire at will is what skirmishers do usually. It's a skirmishing thing. You take an aimed shot and you go pop at it. In this period, because of the inaccuracy of the muskets, if you didn't all fire at once, you could be going pop, pop, pop all over the place, and nobody appears to hit. So it's just not as terrifying as
Right.
600-700 balls coming at you. And of course the noise is impressive. And noise, it's easy to forget that noise is a part of the impression of power that the other side gets. You might not remember when Noriega of Panama was holed up by the Americans in his presidential building. Rather than go in with troops and armoured fighting vehicles, tanks, etc., they stayed outside his palace and blasted him with American rock songs. So he got no sleep until he gave in. I really feel sorry for him. It worked. Napoleon certainly thought, when he first started, that the artillery guns weren't making a big enough bang. He wanted a big bang to fight the enemy. So he changed from, I think, effectively £6-pounder guns up to £9-pounder guns.
So that was more for the bang than for the actual.
Well, the size of the bore is slightly bigger, but it's not going to kill more than the number of men a small ball will kill.
Right.
It might go through more people before it actually got stopped by the massive flesh and bone, but that's an unusual circumstance anyway. It's the shock and awe that they were talking about in the last Gulf War. Was it the last Gulf War?
How's the overall battle going?
Right.
Prussians are doing well.
So over here it's going well, but as in respect to actually victory conditions, I'm now trying to turn my troops that battered the French in the center of my line to my left to assist the division over here in the actually taking of the town, because the French are bringing up reinforcements.
A
from the
lot of
rear.
casualties on the extreme left in the town.
Yes. Here's some melees we're going at here.
They've actually got the German garrison.
Yes, they do. So it's been under continuous fire, but
Yeah.
French are actually moving troops closer. So I'm going to try and flank that by positioning a line over here.
Yeah.
So I move my first units up. Hopefully as soon as these are routed, they're no longer a threat, or at least can be dealt with by my allied commander.
Yeah.
I can focus on a different area of the battle. My cavalry is chasing French artillery all over the place here.
Making sure they can't get any shots off.
You can see them all scattered around. Some artillery pieces captured.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
That's
they're
good.
actually now fighting, firing on the French. It's not going to help me a whole lot having artillery all the way over here, far away from my objective, from that perspective, but it might do some extra damage or wreak some extra havoc to get me a bit of extra points there. so these are running out for now, so I'm going to set up more troops to the flank. It seems like there are a couple of French units waiting for me there, unfortunately.
And they're sending couriers off.
They are. I'll be able to isolate them at some point, get a steady line going.
So how would you go about capturing couriers?
So the easiest way is actually to have artillery or cavalry intercept them.
Mm-hmm.
The other way, you can shoot them if they come close enough.
Yeah.
There's a good challenge of them being hit. The other way is just to block the line between the officer and the unit they are sending their message to.
Right.
In which case, the courier might risk trying to get through, but usually won't. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no script for having the couriers take the safest route possible. So they always try and get a direct route to the enemy. So if you block that off, there's a fairly good chance that it's going to be very difficult, unless the enemy leader repositions himself, to block any communication between different formations. So we get 1, 2, 3. That's nice. We got number 4 coming up here.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
I'm afraid we have to steal Ian away because the BBC are calling and we need to talk to them. So he'll be back after he's famous.
So far things are going according to plan, albeit with a slight delay.
Yeah.
Not too happy with the artillery over here, so let's see if we can do something about that. So we got the first batch of cavalry reinforcements, and we might send them out to actually charge on the artillery. So I'm going to move them forward as an entire brigade, and I'm going to set them to the aggressive stance. They might be a bit hard to control. They might try and focus on these infantry units, in which case they would force them in squares, which would make it easier for my lines to fire on them. So that's not too bad. We have more units coming in over here, another cavalry unit. So we're going to take control and move them forward. Where's your commander? Here. Here.
What button did you press to get to the commander?
You can navigate the order of battle fairly quickly with the arrow keys on your keyboard.
Right.
So moving left to right changes to one of the peers of the commander. Moving up and down goes up and down the command chain.
Got you. So if you were, say, going on who you are, you can then press down. It'll go to your first or your second in command.
Exactly.
And then go along this line.
Exactly.
To get the different groups. There's a big long line of.
Yes, I'm gonna have to wait till they're all organized before I give them things
Sure.
to do. But
Yeah.
Here, we're still waiting there as well.
Wow.
So here you can get a real idea of the size of the battle we got.
It's huge.
Who's in command of this artillery unit? You are. Move up. So we flanked the French that were pushing on our flank actually. So that's very nice. We've got a nice line standing up over here. Just gonna get you in line.
So you've got your cannons in line there as well.
More artillery. command here. Right, you. So I'm sending out orders now to commanders halfway across the battlefield, so it's going to take a very long time.
Quite a while, yes. So where is your officer at the moment?
I'm over
He's
here,
over here.
close to the flanking force that I'm personally leading, and that's doing fairly well. These French are getting utterly battered.
Yeah.
They're within range of the artillery here, and there's cavalry threatening them now, and they're being outgunned already.
And because it's so close to the combat, you want to have the least amount of time at which the couriers send the messages.
Yes. Flank the enemy and slowly creep up on their flank. These guys are being a bit up on themselves, and we're going to slowly retreat. That's perfectly fine. It's all good. And the 13th Brigade has arrived.
Wow.
Excellent. More troops.
It's quite a vast army.
This is in the entirety of Booker's army we got here. So, where is the march? I'm just going to send these guys forward.
You didn't really click on anywhere specific, just
just forward for now.
Forward.
When they get closer there, I'll be able to manage them better. The thing is, if I'm going to send them to any specific location, by the time they arrive, battlefield conditions will have changed significantly.
Too late to, yeah.
I need to support them with a second line.
And kind of those conditions were exactly what the leaders actually had to deal with, was the time it took for each message, each courier to get to their particular position. They had to think so far ahead to actually get things done in a vast area.
We really need to make these guys over here do a proper push now with their support.
So you seem to be continuing to surround the church.
Yes, the only fear here is, of course, the French back. So might need to locate some cavalry. So if you want, here we are.
A long defense line there.
Well, we got contact. Can go. It's very risky. Come on, guys, push up. Yeah, we were chased out here. We got enough man for a second line, so. Courier message, 14th Brigade is awaiting orders. Okay, I need to bring up these troops. It's very difficult to get them up in time to actually make a difference now. But shouldn't let our officers waiting. So who are you controlling? Get you here, so we're still underway. Alright, move up your troops. losing control of this artillery. Right, so we got our cavalry now and are coming to support us. So we need them to start doing stuff. So I'm just going to have them charge a bit if possible. Range. French certainly have a lot of reinforcements, unfortunately.
Well, you have a lot of reinforcements going on.
Yeah, they're so far away though. They're all messed up. Their formations got easily mixed up during marching. Right, you. Nice, these guys are finally routing over here, so we should be able to push up there. Push the constant charge there. So artillery close by is losing command, guys. Who are maybe artillery to our flank.
So you're just slowly pushing the French back away from the...
That's what we're trying to do, yeah. If we can isolate the church, it's fine. It's not the objective by itself. We need to get to the
over there,
town over
to
here.
the actual town.
Over
Right,
here.
okay.
This is tricky because gaining ground over cavalry is quite difficult because infantry is not really willing to charge.
No. And it's very...
it's difficult terrain.
Yeah. And they lack mobility being in the square formation anyways.
Yep. Now we have the Troisième Tirailleur have surrendered.
Ah.
That is excellent news, so press on. Get a direct firing line. Guys, charge them. Need to get my cavalry active now because it's nice to have them close by, but they're not really doing enough.
Yeah.
Losing ground. I need you as well. Come on guys, push up, we can do it. Nah, another French unit surrenders.
Ah.
That is what we like to see. So we're immediately going to move up. At this point my units are fairly expandable, so I'm charging in a bit more than I normally would. Again, I got
Just
so much...
you got so much in reserve that it's...
Exactly.
But do you have another point after this battle which would then...
For this one,
force
no.
units? Okay.
I don't think that's the case in this one.
So if you remember, earlier on...
Yes. Yes, that is very true. Right, we need you guys to advance. Right, so now we force them into a square finally. Cavalry's making itself useful.
Surrounding the church, got forces meeting on this far side.
Yeah, that's fine though. It's the cavalry, they're all in square, so I feel fairly
yeah.
confident that my units will hold. Should have been ripped myself up again. Artillery fire. There's my artillery coming along. They're still being carried out, so they'll be deploying somewhere over here. That would be a very good position for them to be in. Very hard to focus on the battle and completely pouring more man into the line. Right, the cavalry is charging at the routing enemies, which is what they like doing best. I'm going to use that time to move them very close.
So if, say, one of your line of infantry engaged in a charge into the square, would that be effective, or would it just kind of crumble it?
Basically, when charged by, when a square unit is charged by an enemy unit, by enemy infantry, it's better for them to not be in a square.
Yeah.
Because for one-on-one, basically it means that you can have one guy in a square at the front line is fighting off three different guys, so they will tend to abandon the square and just get sheer weight of numbers counting.
And then, so if you say charged forward, force them out of their square and then charge them with forces around the back of them or something, that would be kind of ideal.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, But then you kind of leave yourself open for counter engage, I guess.
Try and push up my cavalry and make them as useful as possible at this point. The artillery here, the artillery there, they were all pain in the arse. Come on, guys. We're very close to the victory location. The time is running out as well, so
Well, we just went out live on BBC Radio. Ian just did his bit, so
he's famous?
He's now famous, yes, officially famous.
So all of you can now say, I saw Ian on the internet before he was famous. Before he sold out.
Yeah, before they were famous videos.
So another melee going. Cavalry, hopefully, finally.
So how are things panned out whilst we were away?
Right, so we broke through the center basically, and according to plan, I managed to turn my forces from the center to the enemy flank. So we're now attacking the town from different sides.
So you're completely surrounding plants and what, really?
Exactly. We're starting from this side, and we're still putting pressure on there, but the main attack is actually coming from over here.
And how much time have you got left to finish this off?
About
20 minutes, 15 minutes?
13 minutes. About 13 minutes.
13 minutes.
So we're fairly close to this position over here. There's just a couple of nasty infantry formations holding it up. We finally managed to get our cavalry units behind the lines and now wreaking havoc among the French artillery, which was causing a lot of pain to my units. And now it's really up to the infantry to make a final push.
So we're just
saying, Ian, you're now officially famous.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
You're charging for autographs after the broadcast.
I always charge for autographs. Makes a change from having to pay people for me to write.
The other thing I wanted to mention is Ian's been involved in writing a number of books, and there's one book in particular that you've completely written yourself, and that's Wargaming on a Budget.
Exactly right. Published by Pen and Sword, and I believe it's available on Amazon.
It is. We'll just find a link for that in a minute when I can get a go on the computer when Bart's not busy.
Sure.
I'll send a link to. So I'm going to ruin your battle plan by finding a link.
Oh no.
Are there any French on this screen?
They are.
Easy to chase them all away.
They're hiding
Mostly
behind
in the
town.
buildings as well, aren't they? I think
Yes.
you can't see
In
them
the church, there are a number.
If you capture the church, is that scenario 1 for you?
No. The church is not the
No.
objective here. It's actually past the church. The church is mainly like a speed bump,
Right.
and a significant one though.
We just had a square on the screen, flanked on two sides. Is it possible for the square to move, to creep away quietly?
No.
It's stuck.
Squares in this game are completely stationary.
Okay.
Where there are historical happen, moving squares.
Yeah.
How fast would a square be able to creep away?
Well, once the troops are given the orders, assuming that it's well trained enough, it would probably move at almost full speed.
Okay.
But it just requires a turn of face.
Would there
to
have been
the
a risk
direction.
to moving? Could it have lost cohesion and
Yes.
potentially?
Yes, there is that risk. And by the time you've said, the commanding officer said halt, and in the French case he would say halt, front, people would face the way they were before. It's too.
So when they were moving, they wouldn't attempt to face outwards. They would.
No.
They all face the same
all
direction.
face the direction they were going.
Okay. I imagine. I hadn't really thought about it, but I was imagining in my head that they would keep formation and try and creep whilst in square.
Yeah.
I guess you wouldn't actually try and move if there was imminent combat.
No. As soon as the cavalry started to come forward, you'd tell them to halt and face where they've got to go. But this square's just
It's got nowhere to go,
time.
really. Cavalry are actually charging into the square. Almost.
Are they going to surrender?
Doesn't look like it yet.
Thinking about charging the square.
No,
but
it's a
not
faint
quite.
charge.
I brought up some artillery to deal with it more effectively, so hopefully that will speed up everything.
Can you see the casualties on the enemy units or just your own?
Just your own.
Right, so the fog of war prevents you from getting details.
Exactly. Although you can get a rough idea if you look at your own casualties inflicted, which is of course also a bit gamey because you wouldn't really know
Sure.
down to the number how many.
But you don't know if it was inflicted on that unit unless it's the only thing they fought. So it's
Yeah.
limited information.
Come on, guys.
They are really totally surrounded, those guys. Cavalry on 3 sides and infantry as well.
I have to say, I think they should surrender. Seems a waste otherwise.
Oh, is that a messenger that just got
Yeah,
shot?
I positioned my general in line with the enemy, so my couriers are getting intercepted. Meanwhile, I'm intercepting all kinds of messages because behind the lines, my cavalry's
Causing havoc with the
exactly.
order system for the French. So you still have
9 minutes.
9 minutes. It's not that long.
No, it's not.
You just get a move on.
I thought you were supposed to be good at this.
I was supposed to be, yeah.
You look at the stats. Bart's got a 4 and 2 major defeats.
I also won.
I don't remember that.
I don't think changing sides in order to get nearly a victory is going to count.
It does for Italy.
I lived there a year, so it counts. Right, so here we see again my cavalry taking out unsupported artillery. Surrender. French officers are bravely retreating.
So that square
just square is
gone now.
running away.
Not surprisingly so. There's a lot of bodies.
Would you not charge the square with cavalry now?
No,
Before
now
my-
that it's routing.
my
Could you
order.
charge it to completely annihilate them?
You could well, completely annihilation. I've yet to see really. That's something.
Or is it a waste of
interesting.
resources
Well,
firing out your cavalry?
I can send my, but if I order my cavalry now, it will be far away probably. I prefer to keep my cavalry active against
Doing
enemies
something
that are
useful.
actually posing a threat to me.
Getting pretty close to that victory location. Is that the last one you're targeting?
There's another one
Oh,
here,
there's
but
another
that
there.
one is extremely difficult to get a hold of because it
Yeah, you've got no chance of that in the next few minutes.
I would need to get personally control of these guys because otherwise
There's a lot of French
infantry
cavalry
doesn't
sitting
like
around there.
charging cavalry for some reason.
Because it's dangerous?
And I didn't commit enough artillery in their support. So I should have brought up like a battery over here
Right.
from this slope that would continuously pound away at the enemy.
Force the cavalry to withdraw.
Exactly. On the plus side, we did finally manage to clear the church. So even though we're not doing all too well in like the victory condition department, when looking at the battle, I feel like we're doing fairly well.
It looks like you've taken a lot of land. You must have inflicted a fair few casualties as well. So what we got time now? 6 minutes, is it?
Yep.
Just warn the tabletop team that we will be coming to have a look soon. So actually, when this finishes, we'll also have a chance to look at the surgery equipment as well.
Okay.
So
You want it up here? Do you want that now?
we'll look at the tabletop, then do the surgery stuff probably.
Okay.
That's okay.
Now, tell me, do you want it up here now?
Yeah. Oh yes. Let's start preparing.
And so it's mopping up the artillery that's trying to retreat, and the French are reforming here in a second line of defense and forming squares against my approaching cavalry. You guys are not doing a whole lot there except for getting shot. We have the victory location turning our color now. Now this artillery over here seems to be in a damn fine position. You can see firing over from this slope, direct line of sight with the enemy. Trying to use my cavalry, continue to use it to actually attack the artillery. And this square is slowly, or is quickly losing manpower at this rate actually. I'm just not happy with the artillery that's standing behind it. Some French infantry that's cut around here as well. only about 3 minutes left in this scenario before it's over. We managed to secure one of the 2 victory locations. We managed to inflict a good number of casualties in the French troops. We suffered a lot of casualties as well in this battle, but of course at this point the Prussian bringing in hordes of fresh troops, so Prussian casualties are much easier to replace than the French at this point, who are already committing their reserves to actually face the Prussians. So again, we got our cavalry just moving in and forcing the enemy into squares, which reduces their effectiveness with plain firing, so our firing line is more effective than theirs. Got melee going on, so I'm routing the enemy and like to continue to charge and send out my cavalry as well in the charge to clear off this this pesky artillery over here. And we got less than 2 minutes left in this particular engagement, but we can clearly say that at the end of the day the town will be ours. Unfortunately, our commander on our left flank wasn't brave enough to really push against the cavalry in this part of the town.
Battle going?
It is going fairly well. The managed to push up even further. Where
how long have we got left, Bart?
Oh, we got what, 20 seconds?
Ah, not long.
Not long, no. So I'm gonna wheel these guys actually. Swap the enemy. Again, our cavalry is forcing them all into squares. And we got look at this nice line of fire here. Look at this. That is beautiful.
That is lovely.
Our own troops are placed lower.
Out of the way.
The French at the higher ground. Deployed in squares, so juicy targets.
Defeat?
And we got a defeat nonetheless. And Ian is enjoying it.
Oh,
a little too much. Defeat being because probably we were too late in actually capturing the victory location, and we didn't capture one of them all together.
It did look like you were winning.
We managed to inflict a good deal of casualties on the French. Of course, the thing is, well, we're measuring up to historical.
Yeah, this is I think it's very accurate. Right, I'm just going to check if the table guys are ready.
And we can definitely say this is an improvement here because previous battle was a major defeat.
Yeah.
So
only a defeat.
We are learning.
We are getting better.
We are getting better.
We're improving.
So yes, probably when you play this scenario, you want to focus a bit more on the objectives than I did in this very case. But I do feel we managed to inflict a good number of casualties on the French side. We really managed to disrupt their defenses, and pretty much the town is ours. So that's it for this time. We'll be back with you very soon, and we're going to move over to the wargaming table now to get an update on their end.
Hello, and we are back with the Field of Glory Napoleonics tabletop team recreating the Battle of Waterloo, and we've come for an update with the Prince of Orange. So
Hi.
Tell us how it's going.
Well, Ian, it's going fine. I'm holding the ridge behind the Hougoumont. I've got a slight problem with one of my guards unit who decided to take a bit of a retreat, being shot at by all sides. So they're just taking a step back. They'll be all right. They'll rally them okay.
It's just another advance to the rear.
Yeah, but I've got a really worrying call from my left flank from Wellington, who has asked for the newly arrived Brunswicks in the black uniforms just here at the front. To get right over to.
So he's asked for your reserve.
He's after my reserve. So
that is a concerning moment.
Well, absolutely, but I think I can hold him, so I'm going to release my reserve.
You don't need a backup plan.
Well,
we've heard that earlier.
Well, I'm ever the optimist. I'm sure that's historical, actually. Yeah, my reserve is going to go over towards the
the
centre, the Hill Saint-Jean, near the Haisson, and we're going to try and help rally the troops over there who are taking a bit of a pounding from the French cavalry that have charged over the hill. And yeah, they're wreaking havoc. The Scots Greys, I believe, have decided to leave the field, which is a bit unfortunate. But perhaps I better leave that to Wellington to describe what happened.
Let's get a quick update from Jerome on this flank before we move across. Jerome, where are you? So Jerome, tell us a little bit about what's happening. Let's move the camera in a little bit closer. Sorry. So you've got complete control of Hougoumont. That looks all very safe and steady now.
It is, but the troops don't seem to want to come out. They're having trouble to.
What's the problem?
Every time they come out,
they're getting pushed back in.
No, they just don't want to come out.
They're just refusing to come out. Fair enough. To be fair, I don't think I do that either.
And one unit has decided to go backwards, but the commander rallied it and pulled them back, told them where their duty lied.
So there's no concern on this side, just not pushing forwards as fast as you'd hoped.
Not at the moment. I'm hoping for another couple of goes and I'll be pushing over that ridge.
And who's in command of the centre? Terry, is that you in command of the French centre? Right. Let me give the mic to Terry. Thank you very much, Jerome. I'm not sure who to call you. Everyone else has got a name. I don't remember General Terry.
God, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm in command of, what am I? The French cuirassiers on this side and the troops defending against the Prussians on the other side. So I'm splitting my command somewhat, but I keep appearing and ordering these cuirassiers forward, so they're just about within charge reach of the enemy.
How's the attack on the Allied right going?
The Allied right?
This one here.
Well, I'm in position to charge. This is the point.
This is crunch time.
This next half hour we'll make a decision on whether or not we can break through on this side. It's quite important to break through. If we can manage to get through here, then the road to Brussels is wide open.
And where are the old guard? Have they been committed, or are they still in reserve?
No, the old guard have gone over to Plancenoir.
So
to defend against
they're redeploying at the back of the battlefield.
Yeah, they're redeploying over here, and the middle guard have moved to the centre of the table as our final reserve in case everything goes wrong.
Okay.
But in general, we're holding and we're still hopeful of breaking through on the road to Brussels.
Let's have a talk to Wellington then. So Wellington, things seem to have gone downhill since we last saw you.
Yes, I think we need some sedatives over here to calm down a little. It's a little tricky. We're soaking up an enormous amount of pressure. Marshal Ney with the French Guard cavalry has driven us back over the ridge, although he's in a terribly exposed position now. So how he's going to get out of that, we have no idea. We've now ganged up.
Luck?
Yes, he's had plenty of it so far. He's trapped between two squares. He has lots of fresh cavalry around him, yet I think he might still get through. He's routed the Scots Greys. We're desperately trying to rally them. So we've been pushed back a good 300 or 400 yards here, and had to take up a new position at the back of the ridge, and are just clinging on in the middle. It's a desperate fight.
So how steady are the troops? Are they wavering, or are they strong?
No, we've now got most of them back, most of the infantry back to just disrupt at one level down. So they're not in a desperate position in their squares as long as they can avoid heavy artillery fire. As you'll see, there's a massive guard battery of French guns down there that are going to cause us quite a bit of trouble, and our cavalry are basically beating each other to a pulp, really. But
so
his guard have
casualties are high on both sides.
Yes, there'd be dead horses and cavalry everywhere.
Over this way.
Over here we have the classic British squares massed together, facing off against the cuirassiers, and the Garde Chasseurs Cheval haven't been committed yet. Vivian's light dragoons here have rescued the day a little bit by a gallant charge to force them into square and into a state on the flank there. We're hanging on by the skin of our teeth on the flank here, so the Prussians are arriving just in time to free up some of our cavalry to come back, and these are our cavalry returning, who will hopefully secure this flank in time. So it's an absolute cliffhanger, frankly, in this part of the battlefield.
Can we have a word with Napoleon? Napoleon.
Hello.
So, are you pleased with the progress? Concerned? Pleased? Is it still possible for a breakthrough?
I'm
totally overwhelmed by my subordinates, how well they've done. Terry's going to now look like he's going to follow up that attack and break the troops while I've drawn most of the reserves over this way.
So you've been drawing the reserves away so that your subordinates can get the glory?
You've spotted it as well. Yes, that's the plan. It's working really well. The Prussians are a bit of a concern.
There do seem to be quite a lot of them now.
Tend not to look that way too often.
That's very good. So let's have a word with Blucher then. Blucher, there seems to be an awful lot of you around now. A lot of these Prussians.
Yes, we've got 3 calls on the table now. We've actually pushed further forward so we can deploy out, and there's not much sitting in front of us at the moment. We've now come in onto the right flank of the French, and we'll look to push on in behind them.
So are you confident you can get there before the British line breaks?
The British line won't break.
You're not needed. You can just take the rest of the day off.
We'll just draw the old guard out.
Great. Thanks very much, Blucher. Next, we are going to go back over to Ian Dickey, and he's going to run us through some very unpleasant things that happened during and after battles. Can I pass a volunteer cameraman? Just need our cameraman. So, Ian, tell us, what have we got here? And remember to eat your microphone.
We're here playing games, but it's important to remember the true cost of what we're playing. So here, first of all, on my left is a stretcher. All of this stuff is French. Fairly straightforward, except it has a wooden stand which would lift the patient up off the deck. That actually translates as help for the brave. The French had a dedicated medical corps called the Service de Santé. You've already seen the jacket and the funny little hat they used to wear. This is a bandage belt which they wore around their middle, and it has pockets for half a dozen or so bandages, which they'd apply to the patient just to get him back to the dressing station.
So that was kind of like a paramedic type duty that they were doing.
Exactly, in a very primitive way. These, if you can get the camera on these, are genuine musket balls which have been fired and been recovered from an archaeological site. Some of these, there's a little collection here, actually had the blood on them when they were taken out of the ground.
This is a musket ball before it was fired?
Yes.
So this is the shape it would have been, and the reason these are not nice round shapes are that's the impact that has flattened those into that shape.
The lead gets heated enormously by the powder, and then gets deformed when it hits the target, and this is the result. So that's the kind of thing we're dealing with.
And you were saying that there's actually blood stains on some of those bullets?
Yes, they are real from a battle site in Holland.
That makes you kind of brings home the reality of some of those things.
I'm going to have to pass the microphone over to you because for the next bit I need 2 hands.
Right. I'll try not to poke it up your nose.
So, faced with a body with a ball in it somewhere, the first thing the surgeon does is take a small metal probe and put it through the hole until he thinks he's touched metal. Once he's touched metal, he leaves it there, and taking a pair of forceps, which are pretty much indifferent to the ones that we use nowadays, follows the metal probe down to where it touched metal, grabs what he can and extracts it. So far so good.
That sounds relatively similar to how you take out a bullet now.
It is, except we didn't have x-rays in that time. Now then, you've got a bloody hole. The first thing to do is to fill it with something, and they wrapped bandages up very tightly, put them in the hole, and then extracted them as the hole healed from the inside. Otherwise you seal in any infection. So let's talk now about the other thing that people love, which is amputations. I'm going to hand the mic back to Ian.
Okay. And I'll try not to pass out. I'm not good with blood. Don't cut anything off.
I love this bit. The surgeon Larry, French surgeon Larry, and my greatest hero, developed a scheme where instead of cutting straight through the arm, which left a bony protrusion, which always attracted infection and caused a lot of unnecessary deaths, he would use a knife shaped like this, a curved knife, cut round through the skin, push the skin back up over the flesh, and then a little bit higher, cut through the flesh down to the bone, and then
the fun part,
using a saw like this, cut through the bone, and it's very much like a modern tenon saw but with an extra curved and toothed end. Cut through the bone, roll the flesh back, roll the skin back on top, tie everything off, close off the arteries, and you'd end up with a nice fleshy stump. They would, are you all right?
Okay so far.
They would do this as soon as possible after the injury occurred, so that the patient was hopefully still in a state of shock, which is its own form of anaesthetic, and reduces blood flow, so reduces blood loss. Other nations, British included, would make the guy crawl himself off the field back to the dressing station. They would let him get over the initial wound.
So there's no stretcher bearer for other nationalities?
No, he might get helped by a bandsman if there was one, but nobody was allowed to leave the firing line to help him, because they were always short of men. Once he got over the initial shock, then they would decide what treatment to give, and that could include amputation or something else. I've only discovered in all the research I've done one source for a cure for any kind of infection. This comes from a biography of a British soldier in the Peninsula who was injured by a cannonball passing between his lower legs. It grazed one leg and took most of the muscle off the other leg, and he got an infection, unsurprisingly. It was so painful, he was persuading the doctors to cut his own leg off. That is a level of pain it is impossible to comprehend.
No, that's
fortunately for him, a Spanish doctor came round about the same time and said we can cure this infection, and applied a poultice of pepper. Now I can't find out whether it was the pepper you put on your food or the red, green, yellow stuff, but it worked. This guy recovered from the infection, recovered the use of his legs, and was able to rejoin the ranks and carried on fighting the good fight. Now then, if you have a problem with an artery that won't stop bleeding, we resort to the old method, a cauterizing iron. You put it in a fire until it's red hot, and then smear the bleeding area with the iron to basically weld it shut. That's the final solution for something that won't stop bleeding. The doctors were also required to deal with teeth. I'm going to need Ian. I don't want you to hold my microphone, but I do want you to stick out a little finger. This wonderful object is a tooth key. The French call it a clef anglais. You put it over the tooth like this.
Yeah.
Do you want to get in close to the camera? Let's right in close, as close as you can get. Over like that. I twist the handle.
Oh, that tightens.
And it really tightens it.
Yeah.
And now I've got a very, very firm grip on the tooth.
Pull.
Or Ian's finger. And at this point, I would usually say, "Are you buying the round tonight, Ian?"
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll let you off. So that's a clef anglais. That's a genuine reproduction.
So what's the translation for that?
An English key.
Okay.
Tooth key. Tooth key. The snag is, as you can see on the end, that you need a considerable gap between the tooth you want to pull out and the other tooth around it.
That's
so
a very large chunk of metal
to be honest,
between your teeth.
It's a bit limited.
Yeah.
It is difficult. It is also really useful for getting a ramrod that's stuck up a barrel out.
Might be useful for the brown bess.
It could be useful for the brown bess later. Now then, to deal with ordinary cuts and bruises, for a cut or a graze, they would clean the wound with vinegar, it being a substance which will kill any infection, generally speaking. For a burn, they used oil, like olive oil, cooking oil, but mixed with an aromatic like frankincense, because they had this theory that if something smelt good, it was doing you good.
But isn't that the opposite of what you should do to a burn? Oil on a burn I thought was a bad thing.
Well, that's maybe what they do. They've got different theories nowadays. I don't hold with them personally at all.
You prefer leeches?
Leeches. Now there's another thing. Leeches. The idea of a leech is that it extracts blood from the body, but it doesn't really take very much. So I'm going to hand the microphone back to Ian again.
Oh, you are actually talk about leeches.
Yeah. This is an authentic, genuine French venteuse, otherwise known as a bleeding cup.
So this isn't a replica. This is the real thing.
No, this is the real thing. What you do is you put some cotton in here, and then set fire to it, so it warms the cup up. Then you invert the cup upside down on a fleshy area, and it will either suck out more blood, it will make it really gush out, if it's a leech operation, or if you just want to show the patient that you're doing something useful, this will give him a dramatic demonstration of how good a doctor you are, because you get a golf ball of flesh come up pink and really horrible looking inside the venteuse when you do that. When you take it off, of course, it subsides gently back down to the normal colour and the normal shape. It doesn't do any good, but it looks as though it's doing something. Perception is all.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of psychology in medicine as well. Just people thinking they're going to get better actually help them get better.
These jars are of a herbal mix. They used a lot of herbs. Chamomile they would use for intestinal discomfort.
You mean they would eat it or smear it on?
No, they drink it as tea.
Drink it as tea.
And you can do it nowadays, and it works nowadays. I've used it on ladies with monthly period pains, and it seems to soothe those. It's possible that Napoleon was being given some for his intestinal discomfort. For a digestive discomfort, you use mint, which is pretty much another soothing agent. And if you've got indigestion or you're feeling hungover, mint is a mint tea is a very good, effective thing to have a drink of. Right.
There's a whole lot of equipment here.
Fine. Oh yes, I've forgot those. These are cloves. When the French could get hold of them, they would give cloves to ameliorate toothache. You chew a clove, you might not like the taste, but it will numb the pain from a toothache.
Okay.
The snag was in France that the British had put a blockade on, so they really found it very difficult to get hold of cloves which come from the Far East. And finally, when you stitched up a wound, at some stage the stitching is going to get covered in blood. And the practice at this time was to use normal thread for stitching, quite large thread. I'll show you a needle in a minute. They're entertaining. You would rub the thread that you're going to use to stitch with this stuff, which is beeswax. That stops the blood impregnating into the thread, so that when you pull the thread out later on, you don't restart the bleeding.
There's no congealing or
coagulating
around it.
That's right. It won't pull the scab off or anything like that.
That's clever.
So that's a very useful thing.
How did they ever find that out?
I have no idea. But if you were into making model ships with thread for rigging, it was a good idea to use that as well. It's like wax.
There's still a lot of other equipment you've got here.
Yes. I think we've probably reached the end, except to say that for really fine operations, now my hero Larry, when he was a married man in Paris studying to be a doctor, his 9-year-old daughter snapped a needle and it went into her eyeball. And the only way he could get it out was by operating himself. Now, anybody who's got or had a 9-year-old daughter will know how traumatic that must have been for everybody concerned. But the best blades they had at the time were cutthroat razors like this one. So if they had a delicate operation, this is what they would use.
That's better. They didn't have scalpels, or that was just better than the scalpels
they didn't have scalpels. That was the sharpest, finest blade they had. Finally, a story with no props.
I want to see the needle, though.
Oh, the needle. The needle is... to go in and out of a wound, they had a bent needle like this. And they use very similar ones today in surgery for sewing, drawing two sides of a wound together.
Very similar, yeah. Is that... It looks quite modern.
It is.
Is that
it is modern.
The quality? Would it have been thicker in the older version?
The difference is this is triangular in shape, which doesn't tear as much as a round needle. but the original ones would have been round wire and
But
sharpened.
would they still have been that thin? Because it looks quite precision crafted for...
It really depends on how much you wanted to pay for the surgeon. If you could afford a really, really good surgeon, you could get a really, really fine needle.
Right.
If you couldn't, you got lumbered with somebody who'd probably stick a bit of wood through. Okay, let me tell you a story. And it's a... Does it have a happy ending? No, it doesn't. My stories never have happy endings. A doctor in Spain was having trouble with patients who have an infection and an engorgement of the sac around the heart. It's called the pleural sac. He, being a brave and enterprising doctor, decided to operate on this pleural sac and did so successfully about 4, 5, maybe 6 times. So the next stage to spread the word was to go to Paris and give lectures to the assembled medical people there about this new technique for operating on people with an engorged pleural sac, because the sac constricts the heart.
Do that, what would happen?
The sac constricts the heart. It stops people being as active and physical as they could be. Probably would lead to an early heart attack.
Right.
I may not be quite right about that. I'm not a medical man. Anyway, he was on the point of doing this when the Catholic bishop stopped him and said, "You can't do this. Playing with the heart, operating on the heart, is playing God." And we then had to wait, humanity had to wait 200 years to get heart surgery from Christian Barnard in South Africa.
So this was the first heart surgery 200 years before, and it got outruled by the current...
Yep.
Sorry, the church at the time.
Yes.
Well, there you go.
That's the medical story, and I think it's only appropriate on this 200th anniversary that we should take time later today to hold a silence for 2 minutes to remember the people who fell, because after this battle is over, there was a scene of carnage you can't imagine. I shall tell you more about that later. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Very interesting again. I just want to check with the digital team whether they are ready to go, and we'll just have another look at the battlefield here whilst we're waiting.